Welcome all in, everyone, for another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We are fresh off of Feast Week. We are fresh off of the first full month of the college basketball season. It is December, and we got a lot to get into, a ton to go over through Feast Week. We'll go over at least the kind of like the abbreviated recap of all that happened and some takeaways from at least like most of the teams that were in it. We'll talk about some of them a little later in the week, but we will go over LMU a little bit and their winning of the Cancun Challenge. We'll talk about Santa Clara and their continued ups and downs and some big news for Washington State when it comes to one of their star players. So we'll get into some of those throughout the course of the episode. But I wanted to start off with the KenPom rankings after 1 month of play. And obviously these are still a little bit in flux, but we're starting to see these numbers become a little bit more solidified and kind of more indicative of who these teams might be 1 month in, as we've started to see some teams play some really good teams, get some opportunities, and we're starting to see what the personalities of some of these squads are. So just going through it real quick, and there are definitely some that are going to jump out, and we'll talk very specifically about those. Gonzaga, no surprise, is sitting at the top at third in the KenPom rankings as of Sunday night. That's up 6 from where they were in the preseason. St. Mary's at 33. That is up only 1, but so very consistent from where the preseason metrics thought they would be. USF at 62, third in the conference. They're up 23 spots from where they were in the preseason. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with the win against Boise and just the absolute routes that they have had against some of these lesser teams, which has really helped them in the metrics. And the team that we'll get into more as we talk about this is the team who's in fourth in the WCC at 72, Oregon State, who is 72 spots up from where they started at the beginning of the season. They are 5-2, a squad that has a lot seemingly going their direction. So we'll go into more detail about them in a little bit. Santa Clara up 5 at 90. Washington State at 103. They're up 8 spots from where they were. LMU at 152. That is down 21 spots from where they began. Pacific at 265, which obviously is really low, but they're up 22 spots from where they began. And there's something to be said about, again, a lot of talk. I've talked about it, about the potential grittiness and decent roster that they're starting to put together over in Stockton. Pepperdine 277, which is down 45 spots. San Diego at 289, which is up 7 somehow. Portland rounding out the league at 308, which is down 34 spots from where they began. So I wanted to talk specifically about Oregon State in this, because this is a squad, again, that started at 144. They have now cut that KenPom ranking in half to 72. And Nick Daschel from the Oregonian pointed it out on Twitter over the weekend that the 2 losses that Oregon State has are both by 3 points apiece, and the combined record of those 2 teams is 15-2. So they have done very well. That is Oregon, and then that is also North Texas, a team that that game at the end did get away from them, but that was very much a North Texas style game, true road game that Oregon State maybe could have had in that one. The Oregon game they definitely could have had, and that's an undefeated 9-0 Oregon squad. But they've also handled their business against those other teams. So they have 5 wins, 4 of them against Division I opponents. Now, that said, the 4 wins are against teams with a combined record of 11-21. But style points matter in these ball games. They have been blowing these teams out. Looked at just like the result over the weekend against UC Davis, where they won by over 30 points. they're really handling their business against these teams that are not as good as them, and they're doing it in dramatic fashion. They have the second best scoring margin in the WCC at 18.3. That is second only to Gonzaga. Talk about Michael Rataj and just the performance he has had all season long, 17 points a game. Sorry about that. Which is 8th in the league, and then a 9.8 rebounds per contest, which is first in the WCC. So a lot of really good stuff coming out of Oregon State to this point in the season. Obviously, they still need to figure out, they need to get a win against a good team. I think that is still kind of something to be left on that calendar of things that they need to be able to do as we get deeper and deeper into the non-conference. Again, like looking at what they've done to this point, like they've done a really good job, but they also have some really good teams coming up. They have UC Irvine, who is still undefeated, coming up. Charleston is a good squad. They could end up playing Loyola of Chicago. And then there's another possibility of another good game before they get the conference play. So they have opportunities coming up in the non-conference in December that could maybe validate what we have seen so far from the Beavers. And thinking of validation and teams that needed to kind of get off the mat a bit. A ton of tourneys happened over the week. 16, I think it was 16 WCC teams participated in one of those multi-team events. And the only one that won their tourney was LMU when they won the Cancun Challenge. This was a tournament that was early on in the week. They had a dominating performance against a good Belmont team, 77-63, and then they got a pretty gritty win over Wyoming, 73-70. Now, that's not a great Wyoming team, but that is still 2 wins on a neutral court in a tournament setting, which is a good sign, a good direction to see LMU be moving. Talked a lot about how there were promising signs in their game against St. Louis just a week and a half ago, and this looked like we started to see more and more of that in this 2-game set. Javon Porter was great. He was the tournament MVP. He had 16 and 12 against Belmont, 29 and 7 against Wyoming. And he had 6 threes in that game against the Cowboys. So we're starting to see the Javon Porter that we knew we would eventually see. Took him a little bit of a while to get going, but we're starting to see that come into fruition. The defense I thought was overall better in these 2 games. It really felt like they were kind of out of sync on that front, but it also starts to look like they have maybe found that rotation of guys that are going to fit. And one of the unsung heroes of what we've seen so far, at least like these past couple games, has been the insertion of Aaron McBride into the starting lineup. Big time glue guy. He, again, started the last 2 games. He had 6.7 rebounds against Wyoming. But a lot of what he's been able to do to this point really doesn't show up in the stat sheet. Like, he's playing really good defense. He's getting to loose balls. Like, he doesn't need the ball to be effective. And I think that's something that they needed, because a lot of the pieces that they were bringing in were guys who needed the ball in their hands to be successful. And McBride, who has been in this system, he knows where he can try to fit in and what he can do, was able to slide right in and really actually help them out in both of these contests. The offense has been more consistent as well for the Lions. Even though they were stagnant at times against Wyoming, this was a team that still trying to find itself. But Will Johnston has been great. He was also on the all-tournament team for this event. They've gotten really good contributions from him. We started to see some contributions from Matar Chope as well. I thought like he had some really good minutes in this contest. Again, like LMU right now is still missing some size. Rick Asanza still out. Not entirely sure when he will be able to return. So the fact that they're starting to mix and match and finding these rotations that are working for them against decent opponents is a good sign moving forward. LMU does have a big week, and we'll dive more into that later on. They're going to be at Colorado State midweek, and they'll be hosting Nevada on Saturday, a big Saturday for the WCC, where 9 of the 11 teams are going to be playing. And again, two Mountain West squads that are going to be big time tests. This Colorado State team was in the Acrisure Invitational, so they have some tournament experience as well. And that Nevada squad we've talked about as it's faced a couple other WCC teams already. This is a really tough challenge for anyone, and this Nevada squad is going to be good. Now, the one advantage there is that they will be coming to LA for that contest, and so there might be a little bit of that home cooking advantage that LMU will have. So overall, LMU good signs over the course of last week. Now, on the flip side, one of the teams that it's not quite red flag yet, but it's going to be a concern moving forward, pending on the duration, and that is Cedric Coward, the forward for Washington State, did miss the Acrisure Holiday Invitational, both of those games that happened over the course of the Thanksgiving holiday. And as of right now, this is a TBD on his return. On a radio show over the weekend, Coach David Riley did comment on his injured shoulder, saying, "We're still figuring it out, getting a few more answers before we really find out what's going on." Unquote. And that sort of quote really makes me concerned about the duration of what this could be. If it's one of those day-to-day sort of things, you almost kind of say like, oh, we're still like working it out. Because again, he could be practicing, he could be doing X, Y, and Z, still figuring it out, and we're going to play it by ear. That sort of language, that wording makes me think that this could end up being a longer term injury, which if that is the case, that's going to be a really critical missing piece for Washington State, especially in the stretch that they currently find themselves in. Yes, they split the two over the weekend. They beat Fresno State, but then lost to SMU in a big way in that final down in Palm Springs. But they also then will be playing Nevada. They're going to be at Nevada. Again, we talked about them again. They're going to be playing Boise in Idaho. They're going to be playing Missouri State. Not a great Missouri State team, but still not someone you can overlook. And then they're traveling across state to take on Washington, all in the next 5 games. So this is a really critical stretch for the Cougars as they are kind of teetering on that KenPom 100 top 100 line. They're at 103 coming into the week, and they've had opportunities. Obviously, SMU was going to be a good opportunity for them, but that fell flat. Really kind of like, again, missing someone like Coward in the lineup to give them some inside presence, rebounding, also just someone else who is going to be able to score for you on a consistent basis. And again, like looking at this, they have at KenPom 103, you've had opportunities against Iowa. You could have gotten something against SMU. And now you're looking at a stretch of games where this could start to go the wrong way. Now, there's enough talent on this Washington State squad, obviously, that they can pull out at least a couple of these games. I think that Nick Calmise has been really good throughout the course of the last couple weeks. We know that Dane Erikstrup has been able to step up at moments and be able to give them a lift as well. So again, it's not like we're looking at Lawan Watts is another one that obviously he's played really well, although he struggled against SMU. So that's going to be just something for him to kind of pick up and be able to see how he's going to be able to kind of fill that gap for Coward. Because it feels like, especially skill set wise, those are the two that maybe this is where he starts to slide in a little bit more and takes on more of that responsibility. But you're missing 17.7 rebounds, and for who is their best player, and for any team really across the country, and especially in the WCC, if you're missing your best player, it's going to be a struggle. I mean, let's, for the sake of argument, remove Ryan Emmard from Gonzaga. They're not the same team. Remove Augustus Marshallonis from St. Mary's. They're not the same team. Remove Malik Thomas from USF. They're not the same team. So you remove Michael Ratai from Oregon State. They're not the same team. There's a ton of guys in this league where if you remove one piece, the entire outlook of the squad is going to be different. And Coward is one of those guys. If he is going to be out for an extended stretch, this is going to be a really tough stretch for the Cougars. I don't know if they get out of this. Like, they could go easily 1-3 in this, and that's not me thinking like, oh, like the sky is falling, but really it's like that's a really good Nevada team. That's a really good Boise State team. That is good. That is a Washington team at home. So those are 3 games really kind of circling that. If you are not at full strength, if you don't have all of your pieces, those games become just that much harder to win. And I don't know. I don't think that they're going to come out of that. A 2-2 to me is almost best case scenario if Coward does not return at any point in those next few games. And now, speaking of roller coasters and what we've seen to this point, Santa Clara. Santa Clara continues to be this roller coaster of a team. Again, we saw it early. They got it a good win, convincing win over a TCU team in the opener of the Acrisure Invitational. So we saw the potential. We know that it's just about the consistency with this squad. They held TCU to 33% shooting. It was Carlos Stewart's best game since he had returned. He got good. They got good minutes up and down the bench. They were plus 10 rebounds. They did a lot of things really well in that game. And then the Washington game was sloppy in the first half. They turned the ball over way more than they should have. Resulted in a lopsided points off turnover numbers. Second chance points was really a key stinging point for the Broncos in that one. And very similar to what we've seen in some of these other games, long scoring drought in the second half. They went more than 4 minutes without a point. Where Washington also didn't pull away in that stretch, but Santa Clara got the deficit down to 5, and then again, nearly that 4-minute mark with almost nothing. It was like from the 7:19 mark on, they went 0-5 in that stretch. The Huskies got it back up to 10, and Santa Clara really just couldn't get back into it at that point. But at the very least, we're seeing some signs of but now we're starting to see, in my eyes, someone who's emerging as maybe the star of this team. And it's not Adama Alpha-Ball anymore. It's Elijah Mahi. He had 13 points against TCU. He had 19 points against UW. He continues to be the best option for the Broncos. He can go inside and out. He's been one of their better defenders, if not their best defender to this point. He brings it on both ends of the court. I've really liked what he's been able to do. Carlos Stewart, his 2 best performances, 20 against Washington, 18 against TCU. So we're starting to see him come alive at almost the detriment of Ball, who, I'm looking at this, starting to think of, did he make the mistake of coming back? Because I'm not sure if we're seeing the best out of him to this point, or even really looking at him as an NBA prospect, because I'm almost what happened in this first month of play, because he doesn't look like the same guy that we saw a year ago that had all of that wild hype and expectations, and just really was one of the better players in the WCC, and really just to this point doesn't look like the same guy. So Santa Clara still continues to be up and down, getting one win, but then getting another loss. The only thing that seems to actually be helping them at this stage is they're still hovering at the 90 mark in KenPom, and their tough schedule has allowed them to stay alive in this. They haven't, even though they have the North Dakota State loss is going to be one that continues to just hover over this team as you think about them over the long run. But I look at the squad and it's almost like I almost want to believe that they're going to figure it out and they're going to do it. But time and time again, we see them not come through when we think they could. And they're going to get one more game against a team that also kind of has also had its own ups and downs. And we'll talk about that in the next episode. And that's their matchup at McNeese State, a team that last year everybody loved going into the tournament. Everyone had them as like they were the trendy 12-5 upset pick, although maybe that was the wrong one because they played Gonzaga. But they came back into this year. Really, a lot of people were really high on them. They haven't really hit the ground running to this point. So two teams that are almost both looking for a big win. And so that is one that Santa Clara desperately is going to need if they're going to get back into that conversation and try to erase any memory of that North Dakota State loss. And as I wrap this up, and actually as we kind of go through, or not wrap it up, like I do want to talk a little bit about a couple of the other tournaments. I was thinking about both St. Mary's and Gonzaga on this front. That both of them winning their tournaments. Gonzaga lost the first against West Virginia, but then took it to Indiana, took it to Davidson, and looked like the team we all saw the first couple weeks in games 2 and 3 of the Battle for Atlantis. Ben Gregg was really good in those two, in the latter two games. And Ryan Nembhard was absolutely himself throughout the course of the tournament, so kind of almost cementing himself to me as like the best point guard in the country. He's averaging like nearly 11 assists a game to this point. So his name is going to be continually brought up as not only like one of, but if not the best point guard. This is reasons I picked him to be WCC Player of the Year going into the season. The only thing that's maybe a little concerning for the Zags to me is the inconsistency of Graham Ike. And now I know that over the course of that tournament, the officiating, and I never really like to blame officiating or complain about that because both teams have to deal with it. A lot of times, there are many other things that you can do to make up for the fact that that the officiating is uneven or whatnot. There's plenty of action that can happen that is within your control. It was wildly ridiculous how bad the officiating was throughout the course of that tournament. Not just against Gonzaga. It's like no matter which game you watched in that tournament, it was bad. And and the most egregious, obviously, is that elbow to the back of Graham Ike's head against Indiana, where that was very clearly an intentional non-basketball play to the back of someone's head on maybe a tarred box out, but not anything that was unusual. The fact that both of them got a technical or a flagrant one in that respect, was absolutely ridiculous, and which almost changed the course of that game because Graham Ike ended up going out to sit. He had a good first game in that tournament, and it was almost kind of it was going to be nice to see if he could get going in that game because he was playing well in the first couple minutes and then had to sit basically for the duration of the first half. We're not getting to see the Graham Ike we thought we would see to this point in the season, mainly because he's been in foul trouble. Now, this week aside, it has been an issue. It was an issue against San Diego State. It's been an issue against teams up throughout the course of the first month of the season. And now a lot of that it's less noticed because of the play of Braden Huff and how good he has been over these first 8 games. But they are a different team when Ike is at his best. There is a toughness, there is a defensive presence, a physicality that he brings that Braden Huff just doesn't at this point. Now, because now both of them are wildly efficient on the offensive end, but in different ways. And when EK is in, it does seem like, especially the Indiana game, I think was a good example of it. Like just how much better they were against a bigger, tougher team when he was in the game versus then when Braden Huff was in the game. And it has to be a little troubling that he has not been able to be on the floor nearly as much to this point. Now, then again, maybe it actually isn't all that bad of a thing yet. Because if he is then fresher later into the season, maybe that actually does give him the opportunity to kind of be at his best as we get into February and into March. But that's maybe the one concern I have, like thinking about what we saw over the course of not only this past week, but over the season, is that Graham Ike is just not in the game enough. And I think when you get to March, you are going to need him more and more against those bigger, tougher teams, and less of Braden Huff, at least in the way that they both play today. Now for St. Mary's, speaking of styles of play, I mean, they absolutely just torched USC in the opener of the Acrisure Classic. That's what they do. And I saw someone mention like USC had done to them what St. Mary's usually reserves for Pacific. And yes, I'm sorry, Pacific, that is a catching a stray on one like that. But that was a game we usually see happen against far lesser teams than USC. They scored 36 points in a full 40-minute game. That is just a ridiculous stat and something to hang your hat on if you're St. Mary's. Everything went their way. They rebounded well. They scored in the paint. They shot it well. Jordan Ross, that was a coming out party for him in those two contests. That was maybe the one thing of like, if you're looking at something, Jordan Ross coming through and showing a lot of the potential that many of us thought he did have start to come to fruition in this tournament. But then you looked at that Arizona State game, and this was a game where I was probably more confident against had they been playing New Mexico than them playing against Arizona State. The New Mexico on a personnel front, I think matches up better with St. Mary's than Arizona State does with St. Mary's. And that is strictly on athleticism. Arizona State, as we have seen over the course of the season, playing Santa Clara, playing Gonzaga, now playing St. Mary's, one of the things that they have that most teams don't is just sheer athleticism. And case in point is Jaden Quinton's, and just how much he changes the game around the rim, how much he changes the game because of his length, defending people, even just help defense. He does so many little things right that he causes so much havoc for any other team. It is wild. I keep hearing the fact that he's only 17. He won't be eligible for the NBA draft until not this coming year, but the following year. So he's a kid that like, he's really fun to watch, and it'll be really exciting to see him continue to grow. But we saw them win a tough game against Santa Clara. We saw them nearly win at the Kennel. They went toe-to-toe with St. Mary's and got a tough, close win against St. Mary's down in Palm Desert. So that Arizona State squad is starting to continue to just shoot up the rankings. So that's a very good Arizona State team. And I think that a lot of people keep thinking about the Arizona State teams of last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatnot. This is a different squad. This is a team that does look the part, and to this stage has met the challenge every step of the way. Now for St. Mary's, the reason I was more concerned about the athleticism is because I think about that game against Grand Canyon in the tournament a year ago. What was the problem? Grand Canyon's athleticism just bothered St. Mary's over and over again, especially the guards. And that is exactly what happened early in this contest. Now, the one thing that I thought was very similar to the way I thought that game went versus the way this game went, or Grand Canyon game went to the Arizona State game, is that the saving grace early on, how they stayed in the game, was kind of how they got back into it in a way against Grand Canyon, and that was Jordan Ross. His ability to get to the basket, his ability to give them a different look, allowed St. Mary's to climb back, to stick around in that game and get a really good lead, decent lead in the first half of that contest against ASU. I mean, like, he was the best player on the floor for the first 20 minutes of that game. And he gave them a different look because Augustus Marciulionis did not have a good first half. He had a much better second half in that game. But when they needed someone else to step up, they had someone else who was able to step up. Now, that's something that did not happen against Grand Canyon last year. And we saw full well what it looked like when someone was able to do that this year. And also just small pieces. I thought Ashton Hardaway played some really good minutes in that tournament, starting to really kind of find his role and find his spot on that squad. Thought we got some good moments from out of Luke Barrett. Mitchell Saxon was kind of doing his thing as normal. A missed opportunity for St. Mary's, but still something I think is you can learn a lot from in that contest, despite the fact that they didn't get a win. They'll have another opportunity. They're heading up to Utah this week, so another opportunity against a Big 12 team that has also been playing pretty well so far in the non-conference. And for St. Mary's, they've at least now seen what a more athletic team is going to look like and how they could possibly react to those moments when they do happen. And it's better that it happens now than you don't see it at all until March. And the fact that they were still in that game, there was a lot of positives out of that, even though they didn't get a win. There's a lot of growth that can happen for the Gales go into this one. They're still 7-1. Gonzaga still 7-1. They're sitting at the top of the WCC, as per the usual 1 month into the basketball season. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to follow on social media at Post by Zach and at unofficial WCC pod, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and then also Blue Sky as well. All the platforms, go find me there. Well, that'll do it for this episode. We'll be back midweek with another one to kind of start to think about these game-specific matchups and what that's going to look like. Big week for the WCC across the board. And some great non-conference opportunities, resume builders for a lot of these squads. All right, that'll do it. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will catch you later.